Pixel Sift.
Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Pixel Sift. My name is Gianni, and as always,
again.
I don't know why is it just at the beginning there. I'm going to get rid of always. I think.
Yeah.
From now on, it's going to be me and Mitch and Scott in the studio.
Hello.
Hey.
And we've got James, of course, making the video magic happen as well. We have got a cracker of a show for you today.
Yeah, this week we're talking about emulating games. There are many ways to do it, some more legit than others.
My name is Daniel Clayton. I'm the creative director at Dime Studios.
That's right. I spoke to Dan earlier this week, and we talked all about his new game, Blockpocalypse. That interview is coming up later in the show.
And finally, we're tackling piracy. Even though it's easier than ever to get games these days, it's still a big issue.
All that and a few special announcements as well that we're super excited to share with you. You're listening to Pixel Sift.
Pixel Sift!
It's not Pixel Sieve, it's Pixel Sift.
Pixel Sift!
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time playing emulators, like when I was maybe early teens, I guess. Yeah, and I don't know. I mostly used to play older games, but this week there's current gen consoles currently being emulated. So that'll be interesting.
That's right. So yeah, as you said, normally it was, there was technical limitations to being able to emulate consoles, and for a long time it couldn't be done, and some of them still have never been emulated properly. But the Wii U has been shown this week emulating the hit game Splatoon at pretty much full res, full frame rate, everything.
So they've gotten a computer to communicate with the Wii U pad.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So basically what happens is the game itself, even if they've had to, muck around with the controls a bit, they've got it to run on a computer, completely emulated, and run at full speed and full res. And, it looks like a bit of a demo of the game. I don't know how much of it's linked into the rest of the Nintendo Network sort of stuff, because it is mostly a multiplayer game. But yeah, it is running at full speed and everything like that, which is interesting because for a lot of people, when they were playing emulated games, you're playing games because you can't play them anymore. They're not available to play anymore. Maybe you'd never had a chance to pick up a copy of some game on Game Boy, and it's not like you can pop down to your local,
Were they scared because the Wii U was apparently not being produced anymore?
Don't know.
That rumor.
It feels
not
like
confirmed, by the way. I don't.
It feels like
we're not breaking anything on this show right now.
Yeah, it feels like for a lot of people, sometimes the technical challenge of putting something like this together is enough of the reason why people would do it. But there is that aspect that if you did actually want to go out and play Splatoon, you can just walk into a shop right now and buy it and a Wii U and play it on that as well. So
Look, I'm morally even, and ethically kind of fine with emulators for retro gaming, especially. I think it's beyond cheeky to use an emulator for a current gen, I think. I mean, emulators are for exactly you said, for games that aren't available anymore, for Abandonware and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't like this.
So for people, I guess, who may not have heard that term, Abandonware it's not really a legal term in any capacity, but it's the sort of description that people give to games that have reached a point where they're past the point of being sold in shops. You can't buy them anymore at all. There's no way to legally purchase them, but they are still games that people want to play. So, it exists in this realm where there's a demand for the game, but yet not the supply to actually play it. So, for a long time, games like Grim Fandango, for example, was an example of that, and things like the point-and-click adventure games like Day of the Tentacle, which just came out this week. For a lot of people, that was impossible to play unless you actually physically owned the floppy disks.
And also, even if they are available, a lot of old consoles are, quite expensive these days.
Yeah.
And just the games as well, especially if you're after the bigger releases like your Zelda on NES or anything like that. You look like $100 a game at least,
or even more.
With some of these things, especially for good condition ones.
Yeah, if there's limited supply as well, and think about the more obscure titles, the ones that aren't as popular as your mainstream ones like your Marios and your Zeldas, where there just isn't that many of them, or there maybe wasn't even a release of them in your region. There are lots of games that didn't come to Australia that people went and played on.
Yeah, what was popular was Pokemon Green.
Yeah,
that was emulated, and people just wanted to have a go at that.
Yeah, even though it was Japanese.
Yeah,
and and it was Pokemon Red and Blue was an updated version of the Pokemon Green and Red that came in Japan. So we kind of got the version 2, but I guess especially in those days, people kind of wanted to play it because it was sort of an interesting extra version, and people were all upon the Pokemon hype train. So it's still a big thing. Yes.
But people tend to just like the challenge, I guess, of just doing something different with their tech. Like, I mean, earlier this year in January, someone hacked the PlayStation 4 to play Pokemon.
Yeah.
Just to see if they could do it.
Yeah.
And I remember a lot of the homebrew apps that people tend to play are actually emulators. I remember on the PSP, one of the few homebrew things you could get was a Super Nintendo emulator, so you could play all your SNES games directly on that portably. And it's one of the, I guess, sort of proof of concept of doing this homebrew technology.
Like legally, this is a pretty grey area. Emulators as such are not illegal, and as long as they don't specifically borrow any original lines of code from whatever they're trying to emulate. The illegal part comes in really with the ROM images, like the game data, basically. So like there are exceptions. That's why it's so grey.
There is this provision, especially in Australian law, where you're allowed to make backup copies of media that you do own, but
is that still a thing?
Is that a thing?
It is technically true. Okay. You are allowed to make a backup copy of something, but for things like, it means you would have to put it on another cartridge. So, for example, if you have a Super Nintendo game, you have to find a way to copy it onto another cartridge. Transferring it into a different form and playing it in a different way or something like that is not permissible. That's why licensing doesn't exist for people who are like wanting to play on a bus or something, a coaster bus or a tour bus. You can't play it on that because the licensing isn't for that. So that's kind of where there's like a grain of truth in it. So people kind of go, oh, that's fine because I owned it back in the day, but now I don't have it. But yeah, it is one of these things. It is.
Nintendo offers up a lot of information on their website about this, obviously because they're a pretty high emulated, company.
Yep.
And they are pretty cut and dry about how they feel about it. Of course,
Nintendo has been quite good at actually, they have the Virtual Console on the Wii and the Wii U and the 3DS as well, where you can actually play a lot of the old games in pretty much the same format.
And they've done a lot of re-releases of older stuff in the new formats.
And
they've always done that.
Yeah, but they even wholeheartedly supported the Twitch Plays Pokemon kind of thing,
which is true.
Which is an emulator in its purest form, I guess,
and something that you actually couldn't do if you didn't have it emulated.
Absolutely.
There's no way that you could have, unless you had some sort of robot actually pressing the buttons on a video camera of a Game Boy. It wasn't something that is physically possible, and you run into problems with that. So it's hard to say, I guess, with whether it's, in some ways there is obviously the piracy aspect to it as well, which is not great. But for games, for example, Virtual Console doesn't have everything on it that you probably want. There are some games out there that just maybe will never make it for licensing reasons. And then, they technically would become into this category of being an abandonware.
Look, I've used emulators before, and I'll probably use them again. I just think, like I said, for retro gaming and abandonware, it's understandable. I'm okay for that. I'm all for that. But yeah, trying to take money from something that is fairly much a current gen console is like I said, it's cheeky. It's cheeky, really cheeky.
There's a game that's just come out, actually, just been Kickstarter funded, basically, not quite come out yet, where they have actually built a game using the NES Zapper gun, and they're actually printing it onto real cartridges in order to make it and sell it, and it will work on a real NES.
The NESs can read them.
The real NESs can read them. It's exactly the way. But how do you develop that if not using an emulator? You need to create something that is going to be an exact replica of the.
That seems dangerous to me because it seems like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make like an engine for a car that doesn't exist anymore and hasn't been sold in a while.
But also Retro City Rampage, for example, they invented a version of the thing which was supposed to run on the Super Nintendo or the NES, but also on the old DOS format as well. So it had the limitations of those particular consoles as well. So, it's interesting, I think, because a lot of people use emulation and all that sort of technology to use that to sort of jump into game development and do interesting things from there. So, yeah, it's to be honest, my dream is that all the games that you played would be able to be emulated and just be able to play whatever you want on any console, any current gen one. But there's always going to be limitations to that, and people, rightly or wrongly, will find ways around that.
Next week, Microsoft announces emulation on everything.
Yeah, we're going to emulate every console.
Your move, Microsoft.
Yeah. Let's jump into our next topic.
Visit us on pixelsift.com.au.
Earlier this week, I spoke to Melbourne-based Daniel Clayton of Dime Studios about his game Blockpocalypse. It came out of the Global Game Jam of 2015, which had the theme, What Do We Do Now? It's a local multiplayer game, and I asked Dan how they interpreted that theme and what decisions they made when developing the game.
We kind of went into the jam, first of all, as a company. So the three of us, we knew that we wanted to work together and make something as a team, just us. So then that way we could commercially take it further if we wanted to. But we also wanted to make a multiplayer platforming kind of game. So we went into it with an idea and a sort of end goal. And then the theme, it made us think a lot about sort of apocalypses and doomsday scenarios and that kind of thing. So we tried to think about abstract multiplayer kind of experiences and ways of creating dynamics where the players have to almost work together to a point and then start fighting against each other, or always be capable of one person screwing over the other people. Or we had an idea one of the earlier ideas was like a platforming game where three people work together and one person controlled the apocalypse, and the scope of that started to get a bit too big, so we kind of dialed it back and thought about really just making a survival team-based game, but because it's in that doomsday kind of environment, there's always that potential for somebody to just turn on the rest of the team and like screw them over to try and get ahead themselves.
So I guess after the weekend of the Global Game Jam, it's 48 hours of intense work and everyone's pretty mentally drained. How long afterwards did you kind of decide to kind of come back to your game? And what was it in the game that you thought was that, this is something we should definitely keep working on past this point?
Yeah, we went away from it for a while. We after the jam, we ended the jam with something that was pretty solid. The project was called Ablockalypse, and it's on the 2015 Game Jam site, and you can compare what we had then to what we have now. And a lot of the art style is remained the same. A lot of the core interaction for the players and the team has remained the same. We've just kind of refined it since then. So we did a couple of weeks of that afterwards, but then, we just had to jump on other projects for probably about 5 months. And then around August, we came back to it and were working towards the PAX build that we then had at PAX. So time-wise, we've been working on it for over a year now, but in actual man hours, it's like a couple of months, 2-3 months of actual labor into it.
I mean, what are some of the things that you kind of need to consider when you're moving from, your prototype from the Global Game Jam into something that would be a commercial release?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, we don't really know. It's hard to tell. I think that it's something that's pretty common across any game or prototype that you're working on. But the real advantage of the Game Jam is that you've got this short, focused time, and you've got all of this talent around you and a lot of hype and energy, so that you can end the jam with something that you can then evaluate. So when we evaluated Blockpocalypse, we kind of looked at it and thought about whether or not we thought that this was something that was marketable, and tried to figure out what we would have to change. And then we did a project audit where we went through and cleaned up all of the hacky code and all of the horrible naming conventions, because when you're in a jam, you're just trying to move ahead as quickly as possible. You're not thinking about the maintainability of the project or anything. So to take it to a commercial release, you've got to clean up what you've been working on, try to modify it a little bit to make it something that is going to be easy to work with as you move forward. Stuff that we've changed in the actual game, we've done a lot of play testing, and we've just tried to continue that playtest feedback iterate loop as much as we can.
So you mentioned that the art style hasn't actually changed hugely from the Game Jam version of the game. And is that something that it just made sense for the game, or was it trying to emulate games that you may have played in your youth?
We're a bit younger than the retro pixel art generation. We're more sort of towards the mid 90s, early 2000s. As a company, we're all about the same age. So it wasn't really inspired by how the games that we'd grown up, because we didn't grow up playing SNES and Sega and those kind of things. The main reason for the art style was we'd never done pixel art before. We thought it would be fun. And in a game jam, it's a good time to experiment with things that you aren't familiar with. So it was also a bit constraint driven. So we needed something that was very light and fast and communicated very clearly. So pixel art was good because we could produce it quickly and make it look differentiated from the other elements. And the animation as well was something that was like, it was purely constraint driven, because in a jam you don't have that much time. So you've got a choice between volume of content or detail of content. And we went for volume of content so that we could, in 48 hours, have a vertical slice of a game rather than a small prototype that was really pretty. So I think in the end it kind of worked out. It's got a novelty to it. It's not the very old school style of pixel art. It's kind of got a modern edge to it. And I think that's just because we haven't done pixel art before. So we sort of made it in a way that it didn't look like everything else.
So the big difference between this game and your other games that you've made is that it's controller focused rather than using a touch screen. Did it just make more sense for it to be a controller on the couch type of game, or is that something that you actively tried to design for?
A lot of the inspiration for the dynamics that we want, the local couch play kind of stuff that we grew up when we were playing Mario Party and Halo on the Xbox, like split screen games and shared screen games. That's really what informed the multiple controller, the multiple players on the same screen, and the only way to really do that is with controllers. So the controller focus, it's definitely because it's a local multiplayer game at its heart. Just the dynamics between the players when they're all in the same room, it's different to when you're remote and you're online. You can pick someone up and throw them in the lava and not have to deal with that consequence. But when you're sitting next to that person that you've picked up and thrown in the lava, it's a very different experience. And it's all fun, and it's in the spirit of the game.
Blockpocalypse. You can check out blockpocalypse.com. It's almost exactly how you would spell it. It's blockpocalypse.com. It's going to be coming out later in the year in an early access form. We'll be keeping an eye on that one throughout the year.
Did you know Pixel Sift is available on other platforms? You can find previous episodes on iTunes, Pocket Casts, YouTube, and on the Pixel Sift website.
Indie game studios Tiny Build and Lazy Bear Games, the makers of Punch Club, revealed this week that they had sold 300,000 copies of their game. For indies, this is an impressive number, but an even bigger number was given at the same time. Punch Club was pirated a staggering 1.6 million times, absolutely dwarfing their sales. What do you feel about this?
How did they get the pirating numbers?
That's an interesting thing. Now, when I was talking to Dan during the week, there's an interesting thing that lots of game developers are now putting into their things, and they're putting these like analytics into it, very similar to what you would be like on a website. So they can tell how many times that people have sent through, analytics to their website, and they go, well, they can compare that against the number of sales that they've got.
Right.
So they would know how many people booted up, they'd know where they are. Maybe every time that they fail in a level, they get all that sort of information coming through. So
That's exactly it.
I've
got some pretty good stats here.
Yeah, go for it.
So we know it's been pirated 1.6 million times. 1.1 million of that was for PC, Macs, and Linux, and just over 500,000 was on mobile. 90% of mobile piracy is Android.
Really?
That's not that surprising.
Android.
They've done lots of studies and they find that there's a real difference in perception between people who will buy games on different mobile platforms. So people on Android don't like to purchase things on average. No, I'm not talking for everyone, but on average they prefer to have more like free games with ads in them.
Right.
But people on iPhone tend to purchase things, but they don't really want to spend heaps of money on it. They spend like $1 or $2. That sort of thing, but they'd be more likely to buy that rather than a free ad-based version of it. So,
I see.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But also Android's, because it's got a more open source version of operating system, there's other ways to install apps rather than just installing it from like the Google Play Store or the App Store on the iPhone. So of course there's ways to do that on iPhone as well. But
So as I understand, TinyBuild and Lazy Bear, they don't believe that DRM is the way to go. Though.
Well, I don't
Right?
think so. They went here. I mean, they've hindsight looked back and been like, this is what we should have done. This is what we could have done. I think one of their, we'll probably pronounce this wrong, but Alex Nichoporochik has been quoted as saying, while it's difficult to fight piracy and most DRM enforced ways are horrible for the paying customers, it's hard to deny it has an impact. Looking back, I believe what we should have done is enabled cross-platform saves on launch. This way, people who pirate the PC version may have converted better into buyers on mobile or vice versa. So, yeah, I guess then they didn't go in the DRM direction and still don't think that's the way to go. And I mean, I don't think it is. There's such a bad kind of stigma related to DRM as far as, game buyers and users and players are concerned.
when we talked about launch day sort of hiccups and things like that, there's a lot of times when the DRM system basically falls over and people who've legitimately purchased your game actually don't get access to it, while the pirates can play it to their heart's content. There's no problem with it. So,
which makes people really upset.
and it's interesting, like what they mentioned there was that you increase there's a value added service in there, so there's a value of having a sync save between it, so it makes it worthwhile for people to want to purchase it and have their saves go between the two games. And I think that's a big thing that Steam has done with making it worthwhile for people to buy games, because all their saves get synced to the cloud and they can download on any system and there's no restrictions on number of installs. And
which is super appealing as a gamer. You don't want to lose all your time and effort.
It is, yeah.
And you probably, a lot of the times, just won't.
I remember there was quite a few games where actually you would have a time limited or like a number of install limitation on CD keys. Basically, you install it on more than 4 computers, or sometimes it was like twice you could do it, and then after that your key was invalid and you'd have to email through a sub story or whatever, and sometimes they'd give you a new key, sometimes they wouldn't. So removing that sort of restriction is a huge...
That is a digital restriction. It's one that they brought in early on to kind of limit piracy and whatever. I remember they used to do it with downloads. You'd get one download or whatever legally and you might get a backup or whatever. And there's every kind of outlet has their different systems. But I mean, they're not. There's lots of really good ways to get back at pirates that don't involve DRM or.
Well, there's even really interesting ways to even do like piracy prevention things. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the 90s, when you had to install games pre-internet days, a lot of the time...
I don't know what that's like. What's that like? No internet?
Well, it's kind of like the same, except you don't go on the internet as well. It's just you get a disc from a shop and you put it in. A bit like the console, really. Yeah. Well, not so much anymore. But anyway, basically what they would have when you're starting up the game, they would often say, turn to page 24 of the manual and type in the word that is line 5, third word. And you put in that thing into the manual, and then they go, okay, now you can go into the game. Or the LucasArts games had like really interesting little code wheel sort of things where it would be like, line up this symbol at the top. Now tell me what the symbol is.
Some modern developers are actually finding ways to, I guess they're not even trying to, at this point, not even trying to stop the piracy, but just punishing people for when they do pirate it. Like, for example, Batman... Arkham Asylum. The pirated version of that game, the glide function of Batman just was inoperable.
It didn't work, which means that you cannot progress any further in the game.
Probably one of the most fun bits of the Batman game is actually zooming around the city with your big Batwing cape out.
Yeah, but like there's so many people on YouTube complaining, and then all the YouTube comments are just like, you stole it.
Basically, that's what the new guys have done. They've done really well. Far Cry 4 did it as well, and Gary's mod as well. Basically, they get to a point, something goes wrong, they take it to the internet. It's like, what's up with this? And they're like, yeah, well, you pirated it.
Yeah, and then they will be called out absolutely. And a Japanese company, they made a visual novel, if you want to call it that. It's an adult game, so it's a bit racy to begin with. It's called Cross Days. And so a pirate...
Probably in James's Steam library.
Probably in James's Steam library, But so that was cracked and pirated almost immediately. But this version that ended up online, the majority of people that tried to install it had there was a Trojan on it, and that. So it had hidden Trojan virus, and that was disguised as the installer. And so someone would go, yes, install, and then it would require the person to fill in a small survey or like a small form about themselves. And then this information was then posted to the game's website along with a picture of their desktop at the time of installation.
Ridiculous. Wow.
Yeah. So that was, and then so you could get that information taken off, but you had to admit openly that you downloaded this pornographic game and you pirated it illegally.
Really good one that I like. Game Dev Tycoon. They were like plagued
yes.
by programmed pirates. If you pirated the game, within the game you would be plagued by programmed pirates.
And your company basically goes out of business, right?
Bankrupting their virtual development. But that was by Greenheart Games, and they've actually done a few other really good ways of kind of like trolling people within their games. I really like that kind of that way of fighting trolls.
And I'm just gonna...
Also, a lot of these development companies I've heard have actually been the ones putting up torrents of their games.
Yeah.
When they've got some kind of inbuilt pirate fighting device. Well, not even that. It's pirate like it's a pirate. It's trolling pirates.
Yeah.
It's pirate trolling.
And they almost use it a bit like a demo because quite often they'll play to a certain point, get people invested, and then this kind of like sting in the tail comes along.
Many of
and
them. I mean, what we were talking about Earthbound before, the SNES RPG.
Yeah.
Basically, if you were playing a pirated version of that, it was all the time in hard mode, like ridiculous.
even better than that though,
And then when you finally get to the end, the final throws, the whole thing freezes
and resets.
and resets and
deletes your save
and
file.
deletes everything. So you have to start again.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
very funny.
Witcher 2 turned a nice, not safe for work, raunchy love scene. They replaced the hot chick with an old haggard grandma. I thought that was pretty funny.
I love that
And I'm
kind of
just
thing.
seeing
It's
it,
like
yeah.
it's just like you download it illegally. All right, here's what you get.
The thing
Witcher
that
2.
really
Eat it.
The
Yeah.
thing that really blew me away was they've gone to a lot of effort to design this grandma and to put her in. Like a lot of work's been done there just for the trolls.
Yeah,
I want to meet the team that was in charge of that. It's just like, all right, you guys model the grandma.
it's
All right.
interesting. So CD Projekt Red, who also run the website or associated with the website GOG, goodoldgames.com.
Yep.
They are very anti-piracy, but they're also anti-DRM. So they don't believe in having DRM copies on their thing. So they put these versions up for people to pirate, but they're free for you to install it. You buy it, you install it wherever you want. But yeah, then obviously they've still got these funny things in there. And
Look, I understand pirates. Like I've been a young kid who can afford games, and back in the day, I did pirate things a lot. It was very easy to go and hire out the video game PlayStation and take it home and just burn it.
I'm not associated with Scott Quigg.
Look, I used to, and like I've got a good quote from the article that we pulled this from. Well, we initially saw the Punch Club thing on. It was people who pirated the game were highly unlikely to actually buy the game anyway, even if they couldn't pirate. Like, broke is broke, and if people can't afford it, they're not going to buy it. But if you can get, and this even goes back to our last topic of emulation. Like if people can access it
easily and cheaply,
they're going to, and sometimes those people can't afford it or they can't access it outside of that. So this is their only way of doing it. For me, being a musician and whatever, I now that I'm finally in the position where I can start to afford things, I'm paying for all the stuff that I maybe didn't quite pay for the right way the first time.
very lucky that you can pick up Pixel Sift for free. Free
It is,
download.
it's
Doesn't
very
cost
lucky.
anything. You're not pirating it. You're
There we
getting
go.
it for free.
Welcome.
Are we gonna release a pirated version of the Pixel Sift?
Yeah, and then
Probably.
everything's
Yeah.
just cowbell the whole time through.
It'll just get really
But yeah,
pixely like in Sims 4 when you pirated that.
That's right. Good thing. Good link there.
Yeah,
nice
nice.
nice segue.
Wow.
Anyway, that's all we've got time for today, but we've got some great special announcements for you. If you want to check out Pixel Sift in the flesh, you can come to, and you're in Perth, of course. You've got two great
You don't have to be in
opportunities
Perth. You
coming
can
up.
come to Perth.
You can come to Perth.
Yeah,
You've got a few days.
don't leave the rest of the world out. You can
It's
come to
more
Perth.
convenient if you're in Perth, obviously. You can come this weekend, which is Saturday, 26th of March. We'll be hosting the Square Heroes launch party. It's at the Glitch, and along with them, we'll be providing some live commentary and some live video. So even if you're not in Perth, you can watch on our Twitch channel where people are going to win copies of the game and see all the festivities there. We'll have commentary from us and from Mark and Aranda, who made Square Heroes, and that's 26th of March at the Glitch from 6 p.m. We'll post details of that on our page. Secondly, we'll be presenting our 26th episode live for you at the Perth Oz Comic Con. So if you're heading down there, we'll be closing out your convention at 4:30 on Sunday, the 3rd of April. It's an extended episode, and it'll be available on Monday, the Monday after.
If you're not there, I'll be sad.
We'll be there.
We'll be there.
I'll be there.
I'm
be there, Mitch.
talking to
Don't
the
worry.
audience.
Yeah, I think
We'll hope you'll be there anyway. As usual, we'll be putting up all the links on our website, which is pixelsift.com.au.
You can also find us on social media. We're on the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our name, of course, is Pixel Sift, one word.
Yeah, and if you want to grab our older episodes, you can visit iTunes, Pocket Casts, or watch the YouTube videos on the YouTube and on Twitch.
On the YouTube.
On the YouTube.
God, I sound like my dad.
If you're on the iTunes, you can leave us a review, and we will really appreciate it. And it will help us,
Kick ass and take names.
Exactly right. That's all we got time for. We'll see you guys again, maybe on Saturday.
Peace
Sorry,
out.
Dad. Bye.